Hi everybody, how are you? Let me just pin this. Hope everybody's well. Let me just post that. Okay, how you all doing? Hope you're all well. My name's Richard. I'm the Global Styling Ambassador for Schwarzkopf Professional, and I'm here to share some ideas and techniques about fringes and fringe variations. A little bit, I guess, about essential looks and where these trends and ideas come from that I'm going to be talking about today. So essential looks is something that Schwarzkopf develop and present twice a year, so in March and September. And the essential looks team twice a year are really gathering all the information on the global trends, looking at global catwalks, identifying key trends. And I think key trends that are not only relevant to hairdressers but generally relevant for fashion, really identifying those main drivers that push fashion forwards, and depicting and singling out several key trends each season, and then working with those trends and developing salon-friendly techniques to give hairdressers an insight both into the runway, but also allowing them to kind of update their trends. So update what we can offer our clients, I guess. Updating our salon repertoire. And this season, the collection is called the Spirit Collection, and it comprises of 3 different collections. The one that we're going to focus on today is called Refined Traditions. But just generally, I think this season it's very much about individuality. I think that's been an overarching theme for some time. And the idea that really there's not really one common trend, the thing that sort of unifies all the trends is there is no overarching trend, there's not one common theme, other than the fact that it's about individuality and it's about the way that we can all express ourselves and share our own kind of cultural identity and our cultural trends. So whether that's derived from different subcultures through to, things that are a little bit more in our faces, a little bit more upbeat and modern. I think this particular collection is very much about kind of celebrating a uniquely kind of creative spirit, and hence it's called the Spirit Collection. The trend that we're going to have a look at today is called Refined Traditions, and that's very much about kind of taking classic shapes but marrying them with some great technical expertise. And I think at this moment in time, that's more important than ever. We've all been able to enjoy some great giving from lots of different hairdressers all over the world. And so I think especially here on Schwarzkopf Pro, we presented some great looks, some great techniques and ideas for you to be working on and nourishing ourselves on while we're all away from the chair. I know some of you have gone back now, and that's a very exciting prospect for us. I'm based in London and we're not quite at that benchmark yet, but hopefully soon. So what I'm going to do for you today is look at one particular trend, as I said, Refined Traditions, and we're going to have a look at fringes. And I'm going to do 3 different fringes for you. So I've got a sort of kind of a short, a little bit longer and a long length to work on. And I'm going to work on 3 different techniques. I'm going to work on working through the comb, which I'm going to do here on this little look, which is a little bit more of a sort of a technical shape. You can see a little rounded shape through here. So this look originally done by the amazing Tyler Johnston. So it's my little interpretation of his look that he presented. A little bit of a sort of a flattening out, rounding of the shape through the bottom there, and this little curving line that works up, in this case, up to just under the cheekbone. And then I've saved the fringe. So what we've got here is a triangular section But I think the important thing to think about here really is not being too fixated on a section for the fringe. For me, it's much more about kind of where the fringe should start and where it should finish, and obviously, all importantly, the length. So we're going to go for sort of a slightly shorter length. And I'd work in front of the mirror a little bit like this, you know, having a little look, seeing what the most suitable length would be, what the most suitable shape would be, given the shape of the eyebrow, the width of the eyes, all those different factors. And then once we've got a little idea, and I think I'm going to go for something about there, just above the eyebrows, then we're going to start. So, working through the comb, and there's different ways we could do this. You know, we can section off, and I think maybe what I'll do here is I'll section off a little. It's quite a thick section of hair. If that was a lighter section, then maybe I might be inclined to go through in one section, but I think as we're looking at it, we could probably break that down. It's quite a thick, deep panel. But as I was taking this, obviously I pre-worked the shape, so I had to decipher sort of more or less where I wanted the fringe to go. And so for me, I'm trying to work definitely to kind of past the corner of the eyes. I don't want the shape to be too narrow and kind of squash the face in. I want that to sit a little bit wider, try and open up this area, open up the eye socket, maybe expose the cheekbone a little bit. So I've given myself a rough width to work to. And now we're going to work through the fringe. So, working through the comb, I always tend to start in the centre rather than at the side, and I will, without tension. Obviously that's the huge benefit of working through the comb, is that we're not working with tension, so it does allow for little jumps in the hairline, etc. And I'm going to start in the centre, so typically that's going to be my shortest point, unless I'm working sort of a bowed shaping. And here I'm using the points of the scissors to give myself a slightly serrated edge. Now I'm resting the comb on the head, so that gives me some great stability. There's no movement in my comb, so I'm not working in space. And once I've got a little bit of a guide put in there, and I can see it's more or less where I want it, I feel once I've got that little bit of a guide exposed, I can perhaps start to work to refine the line a little bit without the comb. And if I feel that's going well, I'm now going to go back to working through the comb. So you notice initially I'm working through the white teeth, so that's going to give me a couple of things. That's going to give me less tension than obviously the fine teeth would do. But what it is doing is it's kind of separating the hair into these little pieces. You know, if we have a little look closer, you can perhaps see how that's separated into little sections by the teeth of the comb, which tends to pinch the hair. So I'm going to get a slightly more exaggerated broken edge to it. I don't necessarily want that all the time, and certainly here I feel I want it to be a little bit softer, a little bit more even, that pointing, especially given the fact it's a mannequin, so it's quite heavy on the hairline. Those injections are usually a little heavier, aren't they? Here, so I'm going to refine now with the hair resting in the fine teeth of the comb. Take my comb away once again, just for a moment. Refine a little bit more. And that allows me to start to work this corner in here. So I can start to control exactly the width of the fringe. I don't really want to do that through my comb because the comb will obscure the hair, it lifts the hair, even just a fraction, it's still going to elevate the hair, so it's still going to affect the density on the line, and it's going to make it that little bit harder to really place that corner. Okay, so I think that's okay for now on that side. Let's come through, we're going to do a similar thing on this side. So starting with the wide teeth of the comb. I'll come through here. Okay, nice to see lots of people joined. And guys, if you do have any questions, I am going to try. I wore my glasses specially for you. So I'll try and take some time to answer your questions as we go. But I think what I'd like to sort of talk about in terms of fringes, because it's a thing that's, obviously it's the main frame for the face if somebody's got a fringe or bangs or whatever you want to call them. It's such an important thing that we get the length right, we get the density right, the movement right if it's a little bit longer. So many different variables in there. And I have a little methodology I incorporate when I'm working with a fringe to try and control the shape. And for me, what I like to do is change my standing position to control the shape. So this is probably a really good example. If I want a rounder, more rounded shape to a fringe, I'm going to stand in front. Much easier to get that rounded shape. If I'm working from the front, my hand's more likely to work a little bit like sort of hands on a clock. They're going to rotate round and I'm going to get that roundness through here. If I want a really super square or even like a bow shape that kicks up at the corners there, if I want that shape, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come 3/4. And once I put that length in at the centre, I'm going to look at that length and I'm going to just create a very square line. If my perspective is just here from the sides, if I create a very square line through there, what that actually gives me is a little bow in the fringe. So the line kicks up in the corners there very, very gently. And then if I want a super square shape, I'll stand 3/4. So side, I'm going to get a bow. The front, I'm going to get a curve the opposite way, and then 3/4 allows me, as I'm working now, to work quite a square line. So all the time just working with the points of the scissors. I still want a very strong edge to it, but I can achieve that using the points. And also remove that tiny little bit of weight that's just going to allow those ends just to bevel down and just bend. So as we come through here, I'm coming to that corner again, making sure I'm moving around so I can get a clear view of the corner. I'm going to try and balance that up nicely with the other side. Get the same width once I feel I'm there. In my little square shape. I'm going to use you guys as a little bit of a reference. Is it looking square? I think so, more or less. So what I'll do is I'm going to drop the second section down, and I should be able to see now my guideline through there, almost. A little bit dense in the centre, so I'm just separating that tiny little top section. I'll make that into 3 sections. I've got the birds here cheering me on, I don't know if you can hear them. So nice and quiet. Not to speak too soon. It's a lovely, warm, peaceful day here in London. Okay, so that's my second section done. And then lastly, just that top length there. And you can see I've got a nice strong guideline there to follow for my final section. So this one I am taking in the fine tooth of the comb straight away. I've got a nice guide to work to, so it can be a little bit more definite. So as I say, this is essential looks, and this particular technique, if you've just joined us, this particular look rather, is from one of the collections called Refined Traditions, which is very much about technique, but and classic looks, but it's about updated technique, modernised technique, and it's about creating slightly subversive interpretations of classic looks, I think, through the use of a modernity. Let's come into that corner there. Refine that, clean that up. But this is just one of 3 different collections that are part of the Spirit collection. And if you go on to essentiallooks.com, everybody is welcome. At the moment, you do not need a password, you do not need a login to access it. Swordscroft have opened that portal up and you can have a look at all these different techniques, all the colour techniques that go alongside them, that really go to make a total look. Okay, so that's our first look. So working through the comb, wide tooth first, create a little guide in the centre, a little refinement on the skin, then pick back up with the comb, and we're going to just track that shape, and here I've tried to mirror the shape of the brow a little bit through there. Okay, so let's move on, say goodbye to that particular look. I'm going to come a little bit longer and a little bit looser through here. So I've got a slightly longer shape, and I've let the edges dry off naturally. Just pop some clips in, maybe a little bit of tape. Just keep that nice and flat close to the head, and allow a little bit of texture through here to push out. With this particular look, I prepped all the hair first with fab foam, as I did, I forgot to mention on my last haircut. That was all prepped with fab foam, blow dried, and I used the irons a little bit there. Here, no ironing at all, just a little bit of a blow dry, just around the roots, and let the ends dry off on their own. I've got a very similar, but slightly wider panel to the one I had previously. The other one was a little bit narrower. Here I've left it a little bit wider because we're going to work with a freehand approach. So we're going to come a little bit more round and a little bit more broken. So here, working freehand, very different approach. And here I use sort of between my nail and my finger there, and I pinch the hair. I'm going to come a little bit longer in this particular look. I'm going to come in from the top, very small movements with my scissors, slightly sort of chewing movements here, to get a nice broken edge. A little bit of pressure on, obviously depending on how sharp your scissors are, you've got to be quite careful with this. But here, starting to just push in that shape. So very gently working down and start to introduce this rounded shape. Now I don't mind if the shape's a little long, I can always come back through and either work again with a free hand, or I could even revert back to using my comb and point in there. So we can see a much softer, more fluid edge through there, much less structure, and I'm coming down deeper into the shape, so it's a lot less contrasting, both in the length and in the texture. So that texture that I've got through here, I'm trying to sort of replicate that kind of feeling in there. And also the line that I've got through, besides that line that drops back, down into weight through there, I'm trying to echo that with the shape of the fringe. Let's see if I can get some, oh. There we go. Wow, so many people. Hey, how are you all doing? Andy, Leslie, Bonnie, Jeff, great to see you all. Thank you for tuning in. I'll try and keep an eye on the questions. I wasn't particularly looking and realised I've not got to the end of the stream and I'm missing loads of comments and feedback, so my apologies for that. Okay, let's come through the other side. do the same thing. Tiny little sections of hair, just pinching without too much tension in my fingers. Gently chewing away. So while this is a very kind of loose way to work, there's still a lot of technique involved in this. So that idea of sort of refined traditions, the idea of technique and how we implement modern technique into these sort of more classic shapes is a really, as I was saying earlier, it's a really great way to kind of reinterpret more traditional looks, sort of more classic looks that we tend to do a lot of in the salon. Okay. So not bad. Perhaps it's a touch long in areas and perhaps a touch heavy. So I'm just going to work back through one more pass quickly. Remove a little bit more weight, mainly from that eye line through there. So we're going to allow it to just peek through there and have a little bit of vision. I never feel like sort of fashion should be too practical. Or it can be practical, of course, but it's never the number one aspect. You know, it's all about a look, isn't it? You know, if it was all about practicality, we'd all be walking about in Birkenstocks, and there'd be no high heels, and that'd be a boring world, wouldn't it? Okay, here we go. So, as I say, just finishing off finally through the comb. So those techniques we spoke about earlier allows me just to refine, pick up the odd long hair. It's kind of hard to catch with your fingers. And that curving shape that drops down into that length then, through there. So we're going to finish off the shape. I'm going to try and add a little bit more texture now. So to do that, I'm going to use a little bit of paste. We're going to use some cold putty. So a tiny bit of cold putty there. Work that through my fingers, and I'm going to work that through the ends, all the way through the shape. I haven't finished this shape at all. So as I said, it's just some mousse, some fab foam through the shape before I blow dried. And that's just having a nice kind of definition to the hair, a little bit of sheen and some separation. So you see a much more kind of chewy result, much softer, very easy to wear, you know, nice, kind of sexy, something you can look through. Okay, so there we go. So that's the look there. You can see these very kind of broken edges, nice and soft, nice and loose, not too much structure in them. And that could probably be worn in a variety of different ways. And that sort of marries nicely with this. I haven't done any pointing here at all, but this kind of blunt, chunky length. It's really about just keeping it nice and minimal through the inside. You could put a beanie on at home, let those textures develop around the edges, just using a little bit of product, in my case some mousse, to help give a little bit of bulk and separation in texture. Okay, so that's our freehand look. All right, and I'll wipe my hands a little. And lastly, a longer length. So here, I've got a sort of naturally dried shape. It's still the same balance, so we're still working with that idea of a shorter length through the front and dropping the length down into the back. Here, because of the extremity of the length, I've got a little bit of disconnection, so it's not entirely connected as the other two shapes were. So we've got the idea of that shape and the movement in the outline, but a little disconnection, and that disconnection just starts at the back of the ear. So when we're working through this technique, and you can find all the step-by-steps that Tyler did on the original shape, he separated the hair just there at the back of the ear, and I've used that approach on all of these three haircuts here. So working with a slightly shorter length in the front, then dropping that down. And then here I let the hair dry off quite naturally, and then where I've got a little bit of fluff and frizz, I went through with a very large tongue just to refine the texture a little bit. But we'll break that up, we're going to add a little bit more texture to that once we've worked the fringe in. And then this fringe, we're going to work with some movement. I'm just going to put this up so you can all see. Mindful I'm in the comments. So here we're going to work with a kind of a sweeping fringe, so something that moves from shorter through to longer. So obviously, I guess mainly we'd tend to find that with a side parting, which is what I've tried to do here. Pop a side parting in. I've used the corner of the eye as a reference. And we're going to use some elevation here, as well as some over direction to get the hair to move from shorter into longer to push across. Obviously, we could do this from a centre parting too, working from shorter in the centre out, so it pushes the hair away from the face. Obviously, shorter hair tends to push the longer hair. So wherever you want that short length to be it in the centre or at the sides, that is where we're going to start. So for us, it's going to be on this side here. Let me take these clips out. My scissors and comb. So I've got this very long length, and I want this to work with the movement in the hair. So I did let that dry off a little bit more naturally, and you can see I've got this little bend in the hair there. So I'm going to pick up on that as being my shortest length, and then allow the length to push over. So I always go for a length, after many years of coming in too tight, too strong and too short, I always tend to go for a length that's that little bit longer these days, that I can then refine and push up if I need to. I'm starting with a very small little triangle in this section here, so if you can have a look, you can see my section there. And I'm going to direct the hair directly away from the head. So on base, I'm going to put parallel to the head shape. And I've got a length there that sits kind of midway between the mouth and the chin, which hopefully does not interfere with the movement in the hair. In fact, it's taking the weight out on the movement, so it encourages that bend in the hair. I'm going to come back with a second section that's a little bit deeper, so a little bit higher up the parting. I'm going to over direct that hair onto my first section. So very much it's a static guide. I'm not moving, travelling around the head. I'm going to put everything onto number one. All the time just looking how that shape is developing. My third section I'm going to come up a little bit higher, so to the top of my fringe section that I've predetermined. So you can see there, let me just turn up so you can look at the top. So I've got one section, first section was to here, second to there. My last section is going to come up from that point. So I've got the full depth of the fringe here. And again, over directing that hair onto my base. Pull it over, and that over direction should start to give me an increase in length as we move through. And the short hair should start to push that long hair over, and you can see that's happening already. That's already starting to happen, exposing the mouth, which is exactly what we want to see. Now we're at the top of the section, so now what I'm going to do is going to start to pivot these sections around until I get to the end of that fringe panel. So pivoting across, but each time over directing onto the base, onto my first section, so everything onto number one. There we go, you can start to see again the length pushing further and further across, and twist the head around. But my standing position remains the same, so I'm sticking with that same standing position, same foot position, which allows me to pull everything across onto my first section. And perhaps importantly there, worth noting, as the shape in the hairline changes through here and it starts to round up, I'm not coming across, not putting that hair there directly over here. It's not coming there. I'm curving, rounding the shape of the hair into my comb. So almost dragging the bottom around, so I'm maintaining maximum length always on the hairline. Does that make sense? Hope so. Okay, I'm coming into my final section now. So again, dragging that around, pulling that hair around the head, wrapping it around to gain extra length at the bottom. And that extra length is going to allow, obviously, the flow of the shape into the sides. Let's have a look if you've got any questions through there. Oh, nice comments, thank you very much. Do you put a lot of tension on when you work with the scissors? Mate, is that, I guess that's working with freehand. So no, not a lot of tension when I'm working a freehand technique. Hi Vanessa. Yeah, so just keeping it nice and soft and fluid all the time. So certainly when you're working freehand like this, not a great amount of pressure. I feel that kind of tears the hair a little bit and makes the hair react badly. So always good if you've got a pair of nice sharp scissors to be working with when you're working freehand. I'm going to use a little freehand now just to start to detail this corner. You come to the edge there and it's pushing over, sitting nicely. So a little bit of freehand as I work in, and I can just chase those ends. So a little bit of extra short hair that's going to push the longer hair around, start to open up the shape. And if we need to, we can work with a little bit of pointing here. So working through the ends, points of the scissors, I'm going to work directly into the lengths. I don't want to cut across, I want to preserve the integrity of that shape we've created. It's all about technique. If we want the hair to behave, we want to try and control that hair. The structure of the shape is super important. You know, how we're working with the texture is obviously very valuable and being sympathetic to the natural texture, but in terms of trying to control the hair, it's that technique that's going to allow us to have that control over the shape. So this does disconnect a little bit, very gently here, and in that disconnection I am going to point into that a little bit more heavily so we get a little bit of a sort of a non-technical connection, if you like. And let's start to just refine that edge. As we've said, we worked everything with elevation, so the last thing we need to do probably is to have a look at the shape of the outline. We don't just want the hairline to dictate that. So let's have a little check. And I think what's important here is we get a little curve in the line. It's a little bit full where we've got the shape of the hairline here. A little bit convex at the moment. Let's make it a little bit concave. And that should help, again, the hair to kind of push over and push to one side. So we get this nice little flow working across the shape. Okay, a little look from the side there, you can see moving over quite nicely. Let's come in a little bit tighter with my free hand, very gently, just controlling that edge. And those shorter lengths, as we said before, the shorter hair pushes the longer hair, it's stronger than, so it should help to control that shape and that line into the side there. Okay, let's finish off a little bit. So let's loosen the hair. I'm aware, obviously, I've used the tongs on it. I really don't want it to look like it's a tongue shape. much prefer it to look a little bit more fluffy, so using a natural bristle or a mix of natural bristle just to loosen up the texture, particularly in those ends. And then I'm going to use here a little bit powder cloud to help add texture. There is a whole dry texture range which we could use too, but I like the powder for this, just gives it a little bit of a lighter, fluffier feel. A little bit of hairspray. This is a light, flexible hairspray from Session, a super dry flex. So a little bit more definition through the top, and then encouraging that sort of lighter, fluffier texture through the bottom. Okay, so I hope you like that. So working from the parting across, using over direction, pushing the hair, everything onto that first section and working through there. And then again, still with that balance, I've been shorter through the front and dropping down into length, because there's a nice interpretation on a longer length. Okay, so I hope you like those three looks. So working from something that's very clean, very crafted. Here, this kind of square shape in the fringe that mirrors the technical aspects of the outline, all the way through to what we've just seen, which is much lighter, more fluid, much softer. There are three fringe variations, working with the comb, working freehand, and then working with elevation to get that hair to push away. So I hope you like those. I hope they've been of some use. Little tips and tricks. I'm sorry I didn't manage to catch many questions. I think I've got another couple of minutes, so maybe I'm going to try and see if I can find a good question. Thank you. Lots of lovely comments. I'm not seeing many questions. I'll take that as a compliment. I want to see the sweet bank style. Okay, we did that. Yeah, I'll take it as a compliment that I've explained myself fully. I hope so. Okay, I think I've not seen many questions in there, so as I say, I will assume that I did explain myself clearly, but if you've got any questions, you need to go back to this technique, and please go on and explore the collection, Spirit Collection. You can do that online at essentiallooks.com. Go and have a look. There's a plethora of amazing images done by the team, great colours, great shapes, and some great dressings as well. And they've all supported with some step-by-step information. So anything that you've missed here, you can go and pick up on there. And yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I hope you've had some fun, and I hope you're taking care of yourselves. I miss you all terribly, and I hope to see you soon. Okay, thanks from me.